You know, it's but that's what got in trouble. Yeah, I guess you can find a jack like that.
All right, bring the order.
Got to turn the mic on. Bring to order this formal session of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners on March 13th at 10 a.m. Do not look at that clock. Commissioner King, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Got a nice packed house today. I like to see that. We got some public comments coming up here. If anybody that came in did not fill out a tan sheet to give public comment, make sure you do that and hand it to Bailey or Jessica. Anybody online, if you have public comment, raise your virtual hand. And with that, we'll get it kicked off with C, which is our calendar session. Does anybody have any changes, updates for that?
I will be at the Juliet's house fundraising dinner. I don't know if you guys go to that or not, but potential of a crossover.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing else. Moving on. D is public comment period. I got a whole stack here. Hopefully I kept them in order. Let's kick it off with Jessica Howard with Chemeketa. Appreciate you coming. Name and address.
Chair Johnston and Commissioners, I'm Jessica Howard, President of Chemeketa Community College, and I reside in Lake Oswego, although I don't actually reside in Lake Oswego, but that is my address.
Good enough.
It's always a hard question
won't
to
hold you
answer.
to
Thank you. It's my pleasure to address you all today and share information about your community college, and specifically about our bond measure, which we will ask voters to support this May on the election ballot. As you may remember, we tried this last November and were not successful. A post-election survey of representative voters showed that 40% of those who voted thought that this was a new tax. They did not realize that this is actually a renewal bond, meaning if passed, it would not raise property tax rates at all. They indicated that had they known the bond would simply keep the tax rate the same, they would have voted for it. The reason for that, as the survey showed, is that community remains overwhelmingly supportive of the college and what it provides to our residents. This positive impression is actually stronger now than before the November election, when it was so high we decided to go out for the bond in the first place. So the major takeaway from that survey is that our communities love Chemeketa and believe strongly in its essential value to the community. They just didn't want a new tax. This time around, we're being much clearer about what this bond, if it passes, will mean for the community. No property tax increase and a continued laser focus on creating the workforce we need now and into the future. The bond measure on the ballot this May will have a significant positive local impact here in Yamhill County. Specifically, it would mean expanding career pathways and workforce training at the Yamhill Valley campus, which we call YVC. First, it would help us expand EMS training, emergency medical services training. Bringing EMS training to YVC will provide increased access to life-saving career pathways for students in the region. With the growing demand for paramedics and EMTs in Yamhill County and beyond, this initiative will help address critical workforce shortages while equipping students with the skills needed to serve their communities. We are also researching building the next step in the pathway for paramedic training here locally. It will also continue to allow us to assess and strive to meet early childhood education needs. Chemeketa has a current contract with the county to provide early childhood education to Yamhill County residents. YVC remains committed to exploring potential enhancements in training and certification options for early childhood education on site and throughout the local community for practicum and internship opportunities. As the need for skilled educators continues to grow, YVC aims to support students in pursuing meaningful careers that impact children and families in the region. We are currently working on building out the pathway from early childhood education into a bachelor's degree, which will specifically help Head Start meet the required degree for classroom teachers. This bond will also help YVC be an innovation campus with industry alignment. As development progresses on the innovation campus, which is the 200-acre site near the hospital, YVC remains committed to flexibility and responsiveness in terms of evolving industry needs. By continuing to grow as a regional hub for hands-on, workforce-driven education, YVC ensures that students are prepared for emerging careers, which directly support local employers and industries. Finally, it will allow us to help continue to provide relevant and responsive hospitality and tourism workforce training. YVC, in collaboration with the City of McMinnville, is leading a hospitality and tourism training initiative to equip 60 participants from Yamhill County with essential industry skills. This program provides a pathway for individuals to enter the workforce through foundational skills training and internships, while also offering career advancement opportunities for those already employed in the industry. By addressing local workforce needs, this initiative strengthens the region's tourism sector and supports economic growth. I appreciate your attention today. I could talk about this for probably 5 or 6 hours, and I don't know that that's the best use of your time. I thank all of you for listening, for your service to Yamhill County that we feel very privileged to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we've got an EMS modernization bill before the legislature and hoping that will increase our pool of available emergency medical with an interstate compact. And so thank you for that. Much needed programs. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, next up is John Olson. Name and address, please.
Good evening, or good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is John Olson. I'm a resident of McMinnville, Oregon. I also serve as the President and CEO of the McMinnville Area Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here this morning to express our Chamber's strong support for the Chemeketa Community College bond measure this May and to urge the Board of Commissioners to do the same. As the voice of the business community, we understand that education and workforce development are directly tied to economic success. Chemeketa's Yamhill Valley campus is a critical resource, providing students with the education, skills, and job training they need to secure living wage jobs that sustain families and strengthen our local economy. These students are not just learners. They are the future of Yamhill County's workforce and the next generation of business owners, innovators, and community leaders. This bond measure will ensure that the Yamhill Valley campus remains a high-quality learning environment that meets the demands of today's economy. This bond will fund critical upgrades to classrooms, student support spaces, and infrastructure, ensuring that students have access to modern tools and technology that prepare them for the real-world careers that they are training for. The impact of this bond extends beyond education. It directly affects our community's economy and quality of life. Chemeketa's career and technical education programs and medical training programs play an essential role in providing the skilled professionals that Yamhill County needs. The healthcare industry depends on Chemeketa graduates, nurses, medical assistants, and technicians to keep our hospitals and clinics running. Similarly, industries like manufacturing, automotive technology, and business management rely on well-trained professionals to sustain and grow their operations. These programs are vital to our economic infrastructure, and modernized facilities will ensure that they continue to thrive. Supporting this bond is an investment in Yamhill County's future. When students have access to quality education and state-of-the-art facilities, they graduate job-ready, prepared to fill the positions that power our local businesses and industries. When businesses have a strong talent pipeline, they grow and prosper. And when families have access to good jobs and economic stability, our entire community flourishes. I want to emphasize that this is not a new tax or a new bond. It is a continuation of the investment our community has made in education, workforce development, and economic opportunity. Chemeketa has long been a pillar of our region's educational infrastructure, And renewing this bond ensures that we continue to support our students, businesses, and industries that rely on a well-trained workforce. So on behalf of the McMinnville Area Chamber of Commerce and our business community, I strongly urge the Board of Commissioners to publicly support this bond measure. We would ask you to join all 3 of the Polk County Commissioners and 2/3 of our Marion County Commissioners in supporting publicly the Chemeketa bond. A strong Chemeketa means a stronger Yamhill County. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. All right, next up, we have Rebecca Wallace. Name and address, please.
Good morning,
Good
Rebecca
morning.
Wallace. I'm at 713 East Crestview in Newburgh, Oregon. Pull up my. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here today to address the misinformation being spread about federal funding, so-called budget cuts, and Commissioner David King's obsession with national politics instead of his job here in Yamhill County. First, let's talk about these supposed budget cuts. A funding request is not the same as appropriated dollars. When a government or organization submits a request, they are asking for money, not being promised it. If that request isn't granted, that is not a cut because you cannot lose what you never had. Yet here we are with Commissioner King spinning this into a crisis, misleading the public into believing Yamhill County is suffering financial losses when in reality, that money was never guaranteed. This is not leadership, it's manipulation. Next, let's discuss the fear-mongering about veterans. I am a veteran. I served in the Marine Corps. I'm a combat veteran. I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I meet regularly with other veterans in the county. And we have a very at-risk population of seniors that are Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans, some World War II veterans. And this week at one of our meetups, I had an 88-year-old Korean War veteran walk up to me, and he was devastated and said, I'm reading online on social media that I'm going to lose my paycheck, that I'm not going to get my disability check. And I looked at him and I said, that is not true. There is no funding cuts to your benefit check that's coming into your account. You don't need to worry about that. So this hits really personal for me. Veterans work across the federal government, and yes, when workforce reductions happen, some may be affected just like any other employees. But reduction in force, RIF, notices do not target veterans, nor do they eliminate veteran services. There are exemptions in place for critical roles, including VA healthcare and benefits. The claim that veterans are about to be laid off in droves or losing their housing is a flat-out lie. But let's get the real issue. Why is David King spending so much time publishing and pushing a national political narrative instead of focusing on his actual job? Yamhill County lost an excellent commissioner who prioritized local residents, and in her place, we now have a commissioner who seems to be using his seat as an audition for Congress. David King is not our U.S. representative. That job belongs to Andrea Salinas. But if you look at his statements, you'd think he was running for her seat instead of doing the work of a county commissioner. Commissioner King has specific areas of responsibility within the county, yet instead of keeping the public informed about infrastructure, law enforcement, and county budgets, he's obsessed with federal policies that don't even fall under his jurisdiction. If he insists on making public statements, they should be about the issues he was actually elected to oversee. If Commissioner King wants to be in Congress, he should run for Congress. Until then, he should stop wasting time on federal issues that have nothing to do with his role and start doing the job the people of Yamhill County elected him to do. Let's stop pretending that we lost something that was never there to begin with. Commissioner King ran on saying, I'll stay in my lane. And right now, there are a lot of people running around Yamhill County with fear, and they are being fear-mongered over the information that is being put out as a commissioner, not as Bubba King personally, but speaking from the seat of the county commissioner. I would like to know, is it the policy of this commission to have individual commissioners providing their personal statements and their personal opinions as what the board as a whole believes? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Is there anybody online that has a public comment? Raise your hand. Seeing none. We had some, I want to make sure everybody saw the public comments that were put into the packet. Plus, there was also one that came in late that I will read as requested. This is from Marvin Bernards. It says, Commissioner Starrett, please read into the record. The chair will read it into the record. To the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, I am writing to address Commissioner Starrett's recent statement to Commissioner King regarding the impact of federal funding cuts on Yamhill County residents. Contrary to her assertion, these cuts do indeed have significant consequences for our community. The projects in question were identified by local city governments and organizations within Yamhill County. They have already received bipartisan approval in Congress, with both Republicans and Democrats supporting these initiatives. The projects mentioned by Mr. King specifically refer to those submitted by Congresswoman Salinas, but they do not account for additional committee-approved requests for Yamhill County put forward by Senators Merkley and Wyden. Unfortunately, it appears that these projects may also go unfunded due to their exclusion from the budget bill. It is crucial to understand that this funding has historically been used to address unfunded mandates in our community and support infrastructure repair projects that our cities cannot afford independently. By rejecting these funds, we risk missing out on a once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve our county's infrastructure and services. Commissioner King is correct in asserting that his role should involve advocating for both state and federal dollars to be returned to our community. These funds, which have been already collected from our households, should be utilized for shared interests such as infrastructure improvements, support for our schools, assistance for veterans, and addressing food insecurity. In light of these facts, it is clear that federal funding cuts do indeed impact Yamhill County residents, contrary to Commissioner Starrett's statement. We must prioritize the needs of our community and work towards securing the resources necessary for its growth and well-being. Sincerely, Marvin Bernards.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I do stand by what I said. These are not cuts. I think Ms. Wallace pointed that out. We have been here for a number of years. We have watched these funding requests from cities all across Yamhill County and the county itself. They're not a guarantee that we're going to get them. And the process is very important to understand that these are, for instance, the Newburgh one that was submitted under the last administration. It goes through a process, starts in July, goes to March. Did you make the cut? And as we're told, do not expect a check until September if your project has been accepted. We have to remember that congressional representatives from Bangor, Maine, to Nashville, Tennessee, to Los Angeles, and every city are submitting their own requests. If there isn't enough money, or if it is not considered a priority, the funding requests go unfunded. So once again, I think it's crucial to know how the process works and to make sure that we're not telling people that it's a cut. We love all the projects that have been requested. We've been behind them 100%, and we do what we can to get them funded, but they're not guarantees. So thank you.
Thank you. Since I was never clear from the beginning when I was voted chair on whether comments would be read out loud or not, I'm going to put some sideboards on this because I start seeing this back and forth pattern coming down the pipe. And I appreciate that the community wants to hear my voice as much as possible every day. So what we're going to do as chair, I'm not going to make any policy decisions on this. It's just going to be as chair. If there's a public comment that has to do with another commissioner or is directed at another commissioner, it will no longer be read. If it is that important to you to have a comment about another commissioner, I implore you to be here and read it in. We also have Zoom options that you can Zoom in and be a part of this meeting. I know it's during the day, but if you're that passionate, and both of these comments, even the one last week that I read, seem passionate enough that you will take time out of your day to be here. So that'll be the policy going forward. If it becomes even more out of control, or that'll be the chair's policy, personal policy. But if it does seem to be getting more and more out of control, then we may take action, and I may recommend a board policy. So that being said, we're going to move on.
Completely support that. Thank you, Chair.
On to item E, department updates. We have Cynthia, who is our transit manager. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Let's see if I can share screen and see here. Where do I do that? It looks, oh, there it is. Got it. Okay. All right. Everybody can, folks online see that? Hopefully. Good morning, Commissioner, Chair and Commissioners. It has been a little while since we've had a board update. I was looking at my last presentation. I think it was 2 years ago, 2023. Not that we haven't talked about lots of different things over those 2 years, but really kind of providing an overview of the whole program. So I won't, this will be fairly high level. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. If there's anything as I go through this, like, wow, I'd really like to learn more about that, then just let me know and we can obviously have a longer conversation, because some of these things I'm going to touch on, I could literally do a whole presentation just on that item, but I'm going to just give you the high level. So there's a few things that we should be proud of that have happened over the last couple years. Yamaha County Transit was awarded an Oregon Transit Association System Innovation Award, and we completed our coordinated plan. This is a plan that's required to be updated every 5 years, and it includes its human services and transportation and all the providers that operate within Yamaha County for those kinds of services. And so that was updated. As you know, we leased a new, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, but well, we leased a new facility, and everybody's moved there. And I wish I had a better picture of the facility, but so we contract our service, as you know, with TransDev, and all of the operations staff are there, all the buses are there, all the county employees. There's 3 of us that are there. And we have a 4-bay shop and a paved parking lot, which I'm very excited about. And we're kind of, you know, it's been interesting to have everybody in one place, because I think we were spread out in probably 4 different locations prior to having this lease facility. So it's been good, but also enlightening, and we're learning interesting things, but nothing really bad. I won't say there's anything bad. It's all pretty good. I think we're gonna have a much better operations long term. I listed some of these things that are challenges. Maybe the biggest challenge is that they are timing. Things have taken a lot longer than we would like, but such as the bus stop installation project, we've actually made a lot of progress in about the last 6 months. I've been working on this for 8 years, and it's sort of one of those things I almost have a hard time talking about it, but we have placed temporary signs at nearly all the stops now. We have 175 bus stops, and that's a good thing. You can see in the picture there up on the far right, that's maybe a little hard to see, but that's a picture of what the temporary stops look like. And those are all placed in, every bus stop is geocoded with, latitude, longitude. And so they're pretty much being placed where the sign will actually be placed. We have gotten 11 sign permits, which doesn't sound like much, but it's authorizes 50 stops, because we did negotiate with ODOT that we can, get permits for a whole section of a highway rather than every individual sign. So if I brought you the stack of just the meeting notes, it would probably be that tall. I'm not joking. Probably 500 pages, because we keep a running document for all of our meetings with the consultant and all. It's quite in depth. And there's some lessons learned, but I'm not going to go into that. we've had some good news. I have it under challenges because it was challenging to do, but it was good. We worked with the bridge, when the bridge was being built in McMinnville, we're able to get the project manager to actually have a pad so that we can have a bus stop there and make a wider area for the bus. And that was not in their scope. And so that was kind of a big deal, even though it kind of should have been, but it wasn't. And then we've tried to work as much as possible with ODOT ramp projects that are happening all over the state. And we've been successful in about 3 locations where we're going to actually be able to coordinate. And Amity is one of those. I went to their city council meeting last night. And that project, we're going to be able to work with them and, improve the bus stop and while they're doing their ramp project. Probably the most significant challenge, and I'm going to address this a little bit in future slides, but is cost increases. As you know, we're under a 18-month contract with our service provider, and the cost for that contract really increased significantly from our former one. And everything costs more now. Our buses are probably twice as much as they were before pandemic. Everything, service, everything costs more. So that creates some challenges on many levels. Still dealing a little bit with supply chain issues. Just it seems that everything takes longer, but we're moving along. The transit center kind of had a plan for a whole remodel, but now that we've moved to the new facility as far as staff, because in that transit center, you see the picture there, our service provider used to have all of their management staff and office folks in that building, which was very, very tight accommodations. And so now it's returned to what it really was meant to be, which is a driver's break room. And so when everybody moved out, I went in and looked, I'm like, oh my goodness, the flooring is just gone. It's just, so we're redoing the flooring, repainting and just making it, nice. We own that building. We lease it to Transdev. So that project is actually starting on Monday. And we went through a whole procurement process and select a vendor. And then my plan was to really try to redo the restrooms so that they are, I call it bulletproof, but it ended up being so much money that I was going to do stainless steel, toilet, sink, this whole thing. Anyway, it ended up doing it. We're still going to make it better, but it's not going to be quite as intense as I had originally planned. We are struggling a bit with security and not so much campers. We don't really have any that's like setting up camp. We did have a couple, but we just asked them to move along and they have. But I put this drawing, this is a concept drawing down at the bottom of like a future transit center as a hub. And we've been, long-term picture, but I put it up here because you see the fencing. I think I'm getting a quote right now to do fencing around that area that is just an open field next to the railroad tracks. And because the plan is I wanted to make that an area where the drivers could go over there and have lunch in the summer and sit at a picnic table or something. But it also serves the purpose of, camp people not being able to go into that area and camp and, do drugs and lots of other things that have been happening. So I'm trying to do everything I can physically at the transit center to not make it very comfortable for folks to do that, but it is kind of an ongoing struggle. But we've made some progress. And operationally, I'm going to show you a little bit of our performance, ridership, miles, hours, that sort of thing. Even though Transdev, which is the company we contract with, bought First Transit quite some time ago, it seems like the real transition to the new company has just been happening in the last 6 months. And there have been some challenges with that. It's with lots of staff turnover is probably the biggest issue with drivers and, dispatch, all sorts of levels of staff, which creates issues with, making sure everybody's up to speed on knowing on training and all those kinds of things. But I feel like we're finally getting to a place where it's leveling out and folks are, it's working well. So I'm not, I'm hopeful for the future, but it has been a bit of a struggle. Because of the cost increases, we have developed a new service plan. We looked at a couple different levels of service just in preparation in case we need to adjust service. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Our Smart Bus Technology program is moving along, and we have made a lot of progress in that area, and also in the fare policy, which I'll touch on in just a bit. I don't know if you can see this. It's a very small slide, but I will provide this to you in paper afterwards. It's just sort of a summary of all of our services and how many trips we have and how many vehicles and the ridership annually for fixed route and dial-a-ride, et cetera. And I'm not going to go through this, but I will. This is sort of the high points here.
That's
Which I can
fine.
move.
Cynthia, when
Yep.
when you send that, can we get that posted to the packet for today?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So what we're looking at in changing service would be that we looked at sort of what's the productivity of our service. So Route 3, which is a local McMinnville route, is probably the most high-performing local route, followed by Route 2, and then Route 44 and Route 22. Route 44 goes to Tiger, 22 goes to Grand Ronde. Those are the most well-performing commuter routes. 44X is just a one round trip that goes really early in the morning, late at night. It's considered a commuter trip. It is pretty low performing, and I think we're looking at, just folding that into the 44. Our dial-a-ride service is, it could be better. Part of that is because after the pandemic, we reduced service in Newburgh and we added more dial-a-ride, and it's kind of a longer story, but just to get to the bottom line, if you look at the average cost per rider, it's obviously highest for dial-a-ride, $24, and for intercity $8 and local $6. That may sound high. It's actually fairly average in the industry for systems our size in rural communities. So it isn't, way out of whack as far as, transit systems of our type. These are a couple scenarios we're looking at. We were looking at, okay, if we cut our service down to 32,000 hours or 35,000 hours, what would it look like? And I have this covered up. We're kind of currently at a little less now, but at 39,000 hours, and we're proposing 35. But if we had to cut more, if we don't get our costs down from first Transdev, then we might have to go as low as 32.3. So what that means is, this is if the higher range, we would reallocate some of our dial-a-ride in McMinnville. We'd increase frequency on our local routes, and then redesign some of our low-performing fixed routes and provide limited Saturday fixed route dial-a-ride. Reallocate the dial-a-ride we have in Newburgh to more of a flex route, and then better serving some of the businesses like ADEC, and increasing, have the headway changes and have a Saturday dial-a-ride. Inner city, we're looking at restoring Saturday service, reducing some of the trips on the 44, but providing more trips between McMinnville and Newburgh, and eliminating the 44X. We are getting some contribution from Washington County, which I've told you about for the 33. We are looking at maybe reducing one trip on the 11, which goes to Salem, but we are doing this partnership with Benton County and another private provider. So I think in the end, when we integrate those together, it will actually not be a reduction in the 11. We still have in our STIF plan, to try and do more for small communities and do shuttles and that sort of thing. I'm not going to really, if you can see this where it's highlighted, the difference between the high and the low, or in color. So I'm not going to go through that, but we would increase only the frequency on the 2 and not the 3, so it's just a few minor changes to get the hours down. Take time going through all of that. Been very busy in the grant financial area as usual. We had our compliance audit, 2024 compliance audit, which is typically happens every 3 years. They were a little behind, so and it looks at everything. There's 10 areas that the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, and ODOT look at, and we didn't have any findings. They gave us a few recommendations, which is very good. We completed, well, I'm telling you, between 2023 and 2024, 2027, because I'm looking at the STIF plan, which goes out to 2027, we will secure $14 million in operating grants and $4 million in capital. During the last 2 cycles, we've been on time with all of our, well, I think we've rarely not been on time with the grant reports since 2015, but I'm just highlighting that we were on time the last few years, and we've done the last 2 STIF plans between 23 and 25 and 25 and 27, and they incorporated a new audit for STIF funding. And those were both completed for 2023 and 24, and they didn't have any findings. Of course, our budgets, and I started to list all the projects and procurement projects. There are quite a few, so I didn't want to fill my slide up, but the major ones would be the leasehold improvements at the new facility. And that one has taken a little longer because we realized we have to go through a low bid process due to what we expect the price to be. And therefore, we have to create a specifications document, and it's turned into a little bit longer process. We expect to have that all completed by, what are we in March? April, probably the second week of April. Then the bids will go out. And so the goal is that we would have that project completed by end of summer. I should probably mention, we have some buses on order. We have 5 buses on order. One impact of what's happening at the federal level related to the buses is that we have grant agreements for all these buses, 5 different grants, but 3 of those grants are obligated and 2 of those are just authorized, not obligated. So the manufacturer had called and asked about that. I think I met with the vendor just 2 days ago, and it looks like they are going to go ahead and build the buses, but there was a chance that they would just say, okay, we'll build the ones that are obligated, but not the ones that are authorized. And you know what that means, so I don't probably have to go into that. But basically, if it's obligated, it's more like a true contract. If it's authorized, it's approved, but not necessarily guaranteed. So let's just put it that way. I wish I had a good picture of the new Durham site, but you can see in this bit up there at the top left, that's like an aerial view. The building is there on the top right. It's hard to see, but anyway, I've already kind of touched on this. Our fleet is good. They've had a few accidents, not the fault of the provider, but got rear-ended and some things like that. But so far we are good. We have enough vehicles. We received 5 new vehicles that were vans for the demand response and lower performing routes, and those arrived late 2024. Completed our annual inspections, which is something that we're required to do. I already mentioned the transit center remodel, and the mobile technology project is going well. It's really where we're at is getting everyone trained, and this is where the staffing turnover at TransDev is challenging because they deal with a lot of this mobile technology. It's things like, not just the scheduling software, but it's scheduling software, our mobile radios, our keeping, passenger counting, all of those things. There's a training component to it. And so as people change, then they have to get trained on the devices and what we need. We're continuing to work on our inventories, which is a lot of work, but it's going well, and we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 years. Customer information, we've continued with our Remarkable Rider Day on August 1st. It's the first Monday in August every year, and we usually provide a shuttle for the county fair and the UFO festival. And one thing I'll mention about customer information is this: everything is becoming much more digital, and so we will not be printing as many like schedules, brochures. We will print enough for people who need them, but it's not like we're going to have, most people are getting their information from, the website or their phone and, more digital communications. We have a Facebook page and a website, etc. The Yamhill County Transit Advisory Committee meets quarterly, although this last year we've met almost every month because it was the grant cycle and time for the State Transportation Improvement Fund. We've, of course, worked on the STIF plan, which I shared with you at a previous meeting, which is a significant amount of time. We've been looking at some concepts for the transit center as sort of a mobility hub, looking at that long term and what that would mean. And then, of course, the committee has been looking at fare policy and the service plan adjustments, et cetera. And we're going to have a meeting with you on May 8th to discuss the fare policy. I'm not going to go into that, but the committee has, obviously, we looked at a fare-free system. We also now have developed a fare structure, and it will have we want to, of course, go out and meet with the public regarding that, but first we want to have a meeting with you. So that's what the work session would be on the 8th. We'll just talk about fares and what the new policy means and get your input before we go out to the public. So in summary, the short-term projects, it's getting the leasehold improvements done, getting the restrooms and the transit center break room completed. I think we're going to be actually installing real signs, not all of them, but a major portion of them by summer. This is a big deal. I convinced Transdev to provide a new proposal, a new cost proposal, because when we were going through our negotiation for our 18-month contract, there were a lot of unknowns. They were in the middle of their union contract negotiations. We hadn't all moved yet. There was a whole bunch of things happening. So they are, now that everything is pretty well known, the shop is set up, all the things are in place, they're going to provide us with an updated cost estimate. And once I get that, they plan to have that to me by April 1st. Then we'll take a look at that. I'll probably be talking to you, obviously Ken and others, and then we will determine if we can afford it. If we want to continue our contract through 2028 with this new cost proposal, that would be one option. The other would be to just go ahead and do the request for proposal for a service provider. And the contract we're in right now ends December, so we'll have to make that decision soon. And I already just mentioned the fare policy collection system adoption is something we need to do, and we'll have our discussion on 8. You know, the tentative plan would be public outreach in May and June, and then implementation July and August. And then I keep forgetting to bring this, but we have an updated customer conduct order, which is kind of our version of, well, it's a customer conduct order, that explains it. And it's, we had added an element of, in the exclusion section, we had a section where we could exclude people for 90 days. And we may have a need at times to actually exclude one more permanently. So we have language that was included in there that is sort of in line with what other larger transit agencies have. So that will come to you for your discussion and approval or not. I hope to bring that to you this month or early April. And it was sent out to all the police departments, all the sheriff departments. We got input from as many people as we could, and we made changes based on their input. So, so I think the things that I think will be decisions for you and for the community in the future are going, still we come back to this local funding source for federal funds. I think we've maximized every bit that we can using the State Transportation Improvement Fund as match in this latest plan. So I really think after this cycle, something will have to be decided regarding local funds. Fair policy, that's a key decision. As I already mentioned, the service provider contract, and related to that is just all the cost increases and if we have to make service changes. If something really major happens, let's say at the federal level, and we were to actually lose funding, then we might have to have a discussion about, okay, what does that mean in service? And I think that's it. Sorry if I took a little bit too long.
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to kick us off with one quick question, and then I'll follow up after the other two commissioners chime in. So my biggest thing, I brought this up before, I brought it up in public at the dais, is, you know, we've had issues with transit come before us. And the one thing that I want to see maybe that you add to your short term is going to be rider headcount. And I know we have the technology, you kind of touched on it, but I want to put an emphasis on that because that is going to affect so many decisions that we make over the next year, whether it's the fare policy, what our routes look like, what this transit system looks like as just a whole. that one number, at least for me, is going to affect a lot of that. So I'd really like to see that.
I was planning to include that in our, just the best I can. I'm not going to promise that it will be perfect.
Right.
But it will be an analysis, and I'll tell you how we came to that result, and as part of the fair discussion. So I'll have that info and, yeah, perfect. And how much we think we'll actually collect and all of those kinds of things. So,
Okay.
but I need to include in that actual writers.
I know you touched on it with
Mhm.
education with the drivers and actually hitting some buttons.
Yes.
I would just, whatever we need to do to put some emphasis
Yeah.
on that, it's going to be a very important number to
Mhm.
me. Commissioners?
Okay, couple of things, and thank you. That's a
Mhm.
lot, and you do a lot of work for us, so we appreciate it. Couple of questions related to our city's contributions.
Right.
I know this has been something that past boards, we've kind of gone around and we've had our hat in our hand and tried to get
Mhm.
cities to contribute. And so I wanted to know where we were with that. I also think that ridership is important because
Mhm.
if we've got large buses going back and forth that are pretty much empty,
Mhm.
I think we need to know that so we can adjust our fleet. The
Mhm.
other thing is, yeah, I think that the fare piece is huge.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering why we're still talking about this and we haven't done anything.
Well, we've actually done a lot. It just hasn't come to you quite yet. But so first question, contribution. So I just have, as since 2000, since I got here, I started we didn't have anything legal in our establishment as a transit district, as a county service district, to require the cities to pay anything. So it was more of a handshake. They would pay this. So the larger cities pay around 20,000, Newburgh, McMinnville. Smaller cities were at that time asked to contribute 2,500. So I set up a system where every year at budget time, I ask them and I increase it by 5% a year. Typically, I have not received an increase from any of the cities although the small cities, I will say, I was at Amity last night for this very reason. They have come around a lot in that realizing that it's valuable to them, they care about it, and they don't have significant budgets, so they want to contribute. So we have received more from the small cities over the last 4 or 5 years than ever before. They don't typically have enough to send what we ask. It's around close to $5,000, but they've sent 1,500, 2,500, things like that. My personal view is, I'm not sure that even if you decided to require all the cities to pay, I don't think it would solve the issue. So that's just my opinion. It could be debated, but you would probably have to have the large cities pay almost as much as the county contributes. And I'm not sure that that would be feasible or they would accept that. So it seems to me there has to be a different solution, or you have to modify your system and make it much less of a system than what it is today. What was your second question was the buses and efficiency. Typically, demand response is the least efficient. They are typically the small vehicles. The way the bus manufacturing world is right now, about all you can get is large or small, vans and big. We are getting Gilligs, which I think are the best, truly only American-made vehicle. They're a company that's over 100 years old. They've been making this style of bus for over 100 years. They pay their people well. It's a great company. They build a good bus, and it's a 12-year bus, 500,000 miles. Best vehicle you can get. We might be paying $350,000 to $400,000 for a truck style cutaway that maybe is a 7-year bus and probably not built anywhere near that quality. So you're sort of always making a trade-off of, do you want a quality vehicle, not so great vehicle, and now they're very difficult to get. I'm pretty committed, and I've seen our transit development plan to low floor ramp access, and I could talk about that for a long time, but I won't. And if you stay with that policy, there's none. There's absolutely none at the mid-size level. They're at the large or at the small. So that is a challenge. And as far as ridership, I think we can increase ridership. We have really literally done zero marketing for a whole bunch of reasons why. Right now, we've been fareless for 2 years. Most people don't even know that. Demand response is fareless, fixed route is fareless, while we were trying to develop the new fare policy. Some of the reason why we haven't marketed is because of the transition in our service provider, and I'm not feeling very confident that I want to go make a big deal and have everybody come ride the bus when I don't feel like things are where they should be. So that's, some of that is my position. I guess I haven't pushed that. The fares, here's my take on that is you're going to have more of a discussion about this is I think the riders, the nonprofits, the people who use the bus, they would prefer we stay fareless. The leadership, the city councils, a lot of people at that level when we surveyed, and it wasn't any in-depth survey, but it was pretty clear they wanted people to pay a fee. Best case scenario, in my opinion, is even pre-COVID, we collected pretty close to $300,000 a year, where maybe we would, on the best scenario, collect $200,000, and you're going to have half of that will be probably cost you to collect it. And you cannot use that revenue for match. So it doesn't help our match issue. But it's more of a political discussion, I think, and more of a decision the community just needs to make. And I didn't want to get too deep in that because that can go a lot of directions, and we'll have a chance to talk about that next month, or in May, early May. I'm not saying that it's not something we should do, but it will, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a split in people's opinion about whether we should or we shouldn't have a fare. Did I answer? Was that all of them? Okay.
Thank you, Cynthia. I want to just say I'm new to your liaison, and this is a world that is very complicated and lots to learn. And I think Commissioner Johnston has done a great job kind of understanding some of that. And I will admit that I have a lot to learn here. But you've been great so far to be patient with me
No
and
problem.
show me the ropes. And I'm hoping that before we have that fair conversation that in the next week or two, be
Yeah.
able to clear a day that I can go ride the bus,
Okay.
as much as I can to understand
Mhm.
who the customer is and,
Right.
who's there, right? To really understand what it is we're doing and try a dial a ride from
Mhm.
my house or from here or
Yeah.
wherever I'm at. So, to best make those decisions, and then hopefully by then I can get caught up on this
Mhm.
beast of
Yeah.
of a department. So thank you.
While you're here,
Mhm.
and I don't mean to take the wind out of Commissioner Sterrett's sail on House Bill 2425, but have you reviewed that?
It
And the
wasn't
re-
2425, it was 30. The one that Ken mentioned to me was,
Oh, no, that's a whole nother conversation.
nother
This
conversation, okay.
one's coming up on as item 5, and it's 2425. It's has to do with forced labor being involved with building electric products, i.e. buses or solar panels. And I'm being very broad and general with
Mm.
that. The reason I bring it up is when I test drove when
Right.
Shetke brought out that electric bus here a couple weeks ago,
Right.
the Optimal.
right.
Can you do some looking into that? And just, I'm bringing this
Right.
up, there's nothing set in stone with purchasing an electric bus or whatever. We're just looking into it. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered from Optimal on what this looks like, if it fits into the program or not. But this seems pretty important that if something like this is coming along, that it's going to
Okay.
change the landscape dramatically. So,
I will look at that.
Great.
I'm not familiar with 2425. I
Okay.
do know that the Oregon Transit Association is working with a lot of other partners, I think, but the bill hasn't been created yet for the State Transportation Improvement Fund, the STIF funding for an increase in that. I know, I'm aware of that, but that's about the only one. But they don't have a bill number yet. I think it was going to the Transportation Committee a couple days ago.
do you want to give a little insight on it, maybe?
Yes, and I'm really glad you're here
Mhm.
today for this. So this is a bill that does not have a hearing or
Mhm.
work session at this point. And we're asking for, what I'm asking the board to do is to ask for at least a discussion about this Representative Deal and Representative Elmer were sponsors on this bill. I had asked if this was going to move forward, and they encouraged me to contact Representative Graber to ask her if there would at least be some eyes on this issue. For me, for a long time, this has been something that has been concerning to me, because I think it's been fairly well documented
Mhm.
that there are an awful lot of abuses in terms of the mining of cobalt.
Mhm.
And we know that it's in the African countries. We know that it's in Congo. We know that it's children who really don't have a choice. If you look at the videos of what this is going, I mean, we have basically modern day slave labor. And I am asking if, since we as a body are often asked to procure
Mhm.
electric vehicles,
Mhm.
that we at least look into having some kind of a vetting that they're certified that this type of labor has not been used.
Mhm.
And the bill would require public bodies that procure electric vehicles to get some kind of a certification. I think it's well-documented brutality. I have it in the information. If anybody wants to click on the links and listen to the stories. And while we are pledging all the time not to forget the horrors of slavery in our past, we are now, I think, complicit in a slavery that's going on now.
Mhm.
And we're not doing anything about it because it benefits us. So I want to make sure that we're not carpetbagging on the backs and the backs of children and people in countries that really are desperate for some kind of a sustenance, and this is the way to do it. So I'm just asking the board to sign on that we at least have a hearing about this, that when we do get cobalt that's gone through the Chinese companies and been mined in African countries, that we can at least certify that there's been some kind of humane conditions so that these kids are not being.
Now, did you say is that related to the 24-25 bill, or there's not a bill yet?
It
that what you
is.
It is related to the 24-25, okay.
And
So-
you look like you're ready to say something.
I'm just,
We're-
we have.
We're a little out of order,
Well,
yeah.
we have your request down
Yeah.
and we'd be happy to follow up on the information. And I just recognize that whatever, just like any other legislation or anything that comes forward, we would do an update to our procurement policies and
Mhm.
make sure that we're in compliance with all those rules and regs and.
Yeah,
or we could also
I
look
get
at-
that, but I just want to make sure that we're not wasting a bunch of time because
Well, here,
we
let
referred,
me, this might be good. I'll just,
We can follow up on the information.
Mhm.
And the only reason I'm chiming in is I just want to be very cautious about staff, and there's discussions that you can have and we can collect the
Right.
information as you requested. I
Right.
just want to make sure that Cynthia and I
Right.
aren't necessarily getting into a discussion that's outside of our lane
Right.
to discuss. So
as it relates to this, one thing I would say, the reason this all came up, the whole discussion of electric bus, is because we got that energy, it wasn't really a grant, but it was the state solution for us not getting some money from 2013-14. I am kind of late. I haven't had a chance to talk to Ken about this, but I'm really leaning towards writing to the state. We already have the money. We received the money. We're supposed to spend it on something green. And I have an idea about how we could do that without purchasing an electric vehicle. And so I'm kind of leading in that direction anyway, but
Yeah,
I need
we
to
can-
talk to Ken about that. So I
but
just
we'll
wanna
get the
mention that.
information as
Okay.
requested.
I just want to make sure that, trying to be efficient, so, okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Nope.
No.
Yes, I will. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't stop. Very good. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, that concludes the department updates, and we move on to our work session. And F1 is discussion of behavioral health housing services grant funds. And Lindsay Manfred joins us.
Finance manager would be appalled to see me doing math on my phone, but do what we can.
Anybody have any questions to kick it off, or do you want to give us just kind of a rough background?
Sure.
Okay.
Be happy to. So some state general funds a handful of years ago were designated to counties through a non-competitive process for behavioral health housing. And these funds came to the counties with some specific intentions around sheltering individuals with mental health or alcohol and drug challenges, and could be used for a variety of things, including things like residential treatment facilities, sheltering, supports to individuals who are homeless, things like shower kits and things of that nature. The total amount that came to us originally was a little over 2.8 million. At the time those funds came to us, the county decided to do, and through HHS, a couple of things. One was to release an RFP for some of the funds in which we would look for community partners who had projects that were ready to go and could be funded that fit within the constructs of the dollars that came to us. And then a handful of those dollars, and we can get into the exact amounts, were reserved within HHS for HHS projects. These funds were, the intention with the funds that were remained with HHS were to open an additional TTRS house, which is our Transitional Treatment and Recovery Services houses. And we wanted to open an additional one of those homes. We've run into a little bit of some complications with that for a couple of reasons. One, acquiring a house became very challenging given the just market. We had the funds for it, we had the funds to renovate it, but we couldn't actually find a home that meets sort of the specifications that we were looking for. A further complication now with those funds is that because of original awards for the Behavioral Health Resource Network dollars, which were the Measure 110 cannabis dollars, when those came out around the same time, there were reductions in what we were hoping for. And so we decided at the time that we could use those, what we call burn funds, for the staffing related to the TTRS house and the behavioral health housing dollars for the actual acquisition of the house. So the actual overall programming would be split between two funds. We have recently learned that we are not getting what we need for those burn funds in order to continue that. So that does put a little bit at risk this concept of expanding TTRS with those funds, because even though we have the physical funds for capital, we don't necessarily have the operational costs covered like we thought we would through those funds. So that was the intent with the internal funds, as well as a handful of smaller things like, a very small amount to purchase things like shower kits and other things that we're consistently needing to provide. But again, that's a very small dollar amount compared to the bigger things. The RFP went out, and through that process, there were 3 awards that were originally made. One was to the Community Wellness Collective for sheltering individuals in Newburgh. Those funds have been used, and contract has sunset. And then also funds were distributed through contract through First Baptist Church, who also expanded some sheltering capacities and did some training for staff related specifically to the population of people this grant was intended to serve. That contract is also sunset, and those funds have been expended. And then, of course, there was the original proposal with YCAP that was a large, significant amount of those funds, just under $900,000 or $889,088. So when we look at the total amount that currently we have within HHS, we have between $1.3 and $1.4 million of unexpended funds that we have, and that includes those funds that were allocated originally to YCAP. So that's the total amount of funds we have now. Those funds have to be obligated by the end of the calendar year, so December 31st, 2025. It is our understanding that after multiple times of these funds being allowed to roll over, it's likely they wouldn't, although that is always something that we can explore, certainly. As far as the obligation, this may be a better Christian question, but per the contract, right, it just reads that we need to have some sort of contract in place or something that would be used to spend down these funds.
So it's obligated.
Correct. I did double check.
I guess first thing comes to my mind is what it looks like for a detox / sobering center. What are the restrictions on the 889,088?
Yeah, so the restrictions around the funds, they could be used for residential treatment, both mental health and or substance use residential treatment. They could not be used for detox or medically managed withdrawal.
But as a service, or can it go into infrastructure?
It can go into infrastructure. So these are definitely funds that can be used for capital expenses as well as programmatic or operational costs.
Lindsay, can you give us that timeline again on when those burn funds were reduced?
Yeah, so the current burn award amount will, that we have in place, those funds will sunset June 30th. And they're already being spent and obligated and all of those things. But the new awards start July 1, and those are the ones that we received a significant decrease. We have not gone through the contracting process. That will, of course, come before you. But the award notice that we received last week was about 30% of our ask, which represents a significant decrease in overall funding because we requested a smaller amount because we weren't intending to use any of the capital funds that we had originally requested. But also the grant funds that we have currently, which are a little, I want to say $2.8 million, were over 18 months. And this is now a 30% reduction in essentially that, but over the course of 4 years instead of 2. So it's an even bigger decrease for us.
Okay. Can you clarify just a little bit about the sort of the genesis of the burn funds?
Sure.
When we initially received that initial allocation, and then what this looks like and
Connection.
why we have that reduction?
Sure. So we have the original burn funds. They are associated with the Measure 110 that was originally passed. And when it was passed, that allocated cannabis tax dollars for the startup, I suppose, of the burns, which were intended to increase access for alcohol and drug treatment throughout the state, as well as increase connectivity of individuals experiencing substance use disorder in hopes of getting them into treatment and a number of things. There have been various processes that have been unclear to me in terms of how those funding formulas were put together, as well as how the funding allocations and decisions were made. But the original grant was almost the process was about 2 years ago, and then the funds went in place in July 1st of 2023. So we are getting ready to conclude the first sort of request that went out where everyone had to write a proposal, and that's sunsetting. And they have since gone through an additional process to reallocate funds rather than continue funding or anything like that. They made the decision, which I was supportive of, to reconsider proposals. And that process has just concluded, and everyone is getting their award notifications, including us. And so the term of those will begin July 1st and go through 4 years, unless there are changes.
Got it. Thank you.
Questions? All right.
Is there anything else that would be helpful in terms of the just housing dollars and where we're at with the 1.3 million that we still have currently?
So the capacity for the TTRS homes, all of them, the women's, the families, the men, where are we at with capacity, and do we have waiting lists?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically we do have waiting lists. We do have one right now. One of our houses is out of commission. Unfortunately, our largest house, it is going having some much needed renovation, which we are very excited about. I suspect that once we get that house up and running, we will likely be fine for families. I think what we were hoping for was a house that was for adults only. And currently, because currently the houses are all people with children, which is much needed and great. And thinking about expanding this model to sort of the adults only who may be coming out of a residential treatment, but not quite ready for complete independent housing and just really wanting that closer accountability they get in a program like that. But it is not as intensive as, say, a residential treatment. So it's sort of a graduated step down.
So can you give us some information on your relationship or collaboration, for instance, with an Oxford House or someplace that is that transitional step?
Sure. We do collaborate, and usually it's through referral and connection of clients that we have that are needing, whether it's Oxford House or Helping Hands or one of our own sort of programs or whatnot. So it's usually just through referrals and helping people get connected to the right services when they are open. I did recently have a conversation about a week ago or sometime last week. And in that conversation, it seems like we were not struggling to get people into those homes. I will say the TTRS program is a bit more strict than intentionally. That's the plan than some of those programs, but not as independent as, say, our Sheridan Housing Complex, which is just general recovery housing, where people live independently. There are a handful of requirements around just not using drugs or alcohol on the premises, but people are not required to, say, go to groups or treatment or things like that, as long as they're following the rules, because the intention really is to create a community where people have, the same sort of ideas about whether they're going to be using on site or not, or drinking alcohol.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is item G is our consent agenda. We have nothing. H is old business. There's nothing. On to I is other business. I1 is consideration to authorize the Department of Community Justice, YCDCJ Director, to submit Phase 1 of Criminal Justice Commission, CJC, specialty court grants to support Yamhill County Adult Recovery Court, ARC, Court Coordinated Service, CCS, and Juvenile Recovery Court, JRC, for the 2025-27 biennium.
Chair, I would move approval. And I also want to have a lot of props for this organization, but I would move approval.
Approval has been made. Is there any further, or been motioned? Is there any further discussion?
Reiterate there, it sounds like this one was a lot of work and continues to be. I'm happy that it's gotten this far.
We have in Yamhill County one of the oldest drug courts in the nation, in the state, definitely. And I can say it's been an honor to see folks graduate. We have very committed partners. I'm on the steering committee with Judge Wiles, and when Judge Collins took this over, he was very passionate about it. And it's definitely, it's critical and it's life-changing. And I can't say enough about how life-changing these drug courts are. So very happy that we're doing this.
Great. All right, motion's been made. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to I2 is consideration to authorize Lindsay Manfrin or designee on behalf of Yamhill County Health and Human Services to submit an application for funding from Yamhill County Community Care Organization in the amount of $20,000.
I would move approval.
Motion's been made. Any further discussion?
None.
None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I3 is consideration of a board order in the matter of approving a sublease with the Yamhill Valley Farm Workers Clinic, WIC, and terminating board order 24-131.
I'd move approval, Chair.
Motion's been made. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item I4 is consideration to authorize Yamhill County Solid Waste to submit 5 funding authorization forms and determine which authorization level, full, partial, or none, should be given for each funding category for each service provider or other entity in regards to transportation, contamination evaluation, contamination reduction programming, recycling service expansion identified in the needs assessment, and purchase of post-consumer recycled content collection containers that are due to DEQ by March 31st, 2025.
Chair, I need a lot more information on this. This was.
We
this
have
was a
Ashley here.
conundrum.
Yeah. Come on down.
And just to let you know, for myself, it's been a lot. I have a flow chart for this whole thing, so.
I'm wondering if that's something we can get information prior to and then come back and discuss it, because if it's complicated and you're trying to figure it out, I don't think at this juncture,
Mhm.
I would feel comfortable making any.
We were informed yesterday that DEQ is expanding the due date till April 15th. So
Ah. So you want to give it you want week, 2 weeks?
Just some time to read what you've come up with.
okay.
So are you prepared if we give it a week? Do you have enough information gathered to?
Yeah, I already know what, as far as the funding and everything, it was just that the decision to determine which level of funding for each category should be for the board to decide that.
Okay, so let's just delay it a week then. Should be enough time for us to review.
Can we do it in 2 weeks? I will be in Bend next week for
Sure.
a conference.
Yep,
you.
absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
And if there's specific questions, once you've had a chance to review it, if there's specific questions that you would like Ashley to bring back, you can email us and we can follow up on that.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
All right, we're gonna push that one off then.
All right.
Item I4 is being moved to whatever date that is, 2 weeks from now. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Jody.
Thanks, Jody.
Item I5, consideration of a letter to be submitted in support of House Bill 2425 regarding the proposition to ensure that forced labor is not used for electric products that public bodies procure. You want to give us one more rundown on that?
Yeah, I think I've made my case. I think really what I'm looking for is for the board to approve a letter to Representative Graber to ask for a hearing, just so that we can hear a little more about this and how we can have more responsible procurement, just so that when it comes to us, we can feel like, okay, we're not part of this problem.
Right.
So I would move approval.
Any further discussion?
None for me.
All right.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Motion's been made. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to the end. Item J is public hearings. There is none. K is announcements. Commissioner King?
I sent a follow-up from Commissioner Sterrett's questions last week to Ken and you both, and just information from the Congresswoman's office of just the information that I received, and hoping we can put that to bed here pretty soon. Attended the AOC legislative things this last week, and that was my first chance really crack at getting to go to those. The last one I was sick for. I think I was sick during that time, but I learned a lot from that process, and it was going in person was very helpful. So glad that it's only in Salem. But a great group there at the AOC, and getting to learn quite a bit about that. And then Commissioner Johnson and I met with Director Manfred on just HHS and the public health and broad scope of work there for another series of orientation, and a couple of good ideas rolling around in the head. Hopefully we get to implement those and move forward. So thank you guys. And I think that's it. I don't think that the AMNI City Council made it on my calendar, so I need to double check that, because I realized this morning that they had one. So I need to go back and watch that video and follow up with the mayor.
Commissioner Sterrett?
We'll be in Amity tonight, so.
Yeah,
She'll be
yeah, I'll
there.
be down there.
Quickly, just that we talked about the wildfire map, the Oregon Property Owners Association along with Harney County, Grant County, and a couple of property owners did file a lawsuit against the Oregon Department of Forestry on the wildfire maps. So that happened. And we had a number of, steering committee meetings on Monday regarding stuff that was on the legislative committee's agenda. And one of the biggest ones I think was important was the EMS personnel licensure compact, which is something Oregon has been pretty slow to in the past, certainly with nurses licensing, but this will allow that interstate compact of EMS personnel, which we desperately need. I did spend some time at Blanchet Farm, which is outside of Carlton. And for those who are not aware, this has been since 1962. Actually, a group of University of Portland students bought this 62-acre property. And it's been a recovery haven for men for a number of years. And they have woodworking and they teach, all about farm animals and beekeeping, giving them some skills. It's an 8-month program and the residents don't have to pay room and board. And it's been a huge, huge benefit to the recovery community in Yamhill County. So very happy to see that that's still going.
How many beds was that, did you say?
They have a capacity for
Capacity.
24,
Wow.
but they like to keep it around 20, 21. Right now, there are 16 men there, and they're doing it all. They used to build tiny homes. They used to build Adirondack furniture, and a lot of talented guys out there.
Fantastic. Last Thursday was MWACT. We elected a new chair and vice chair. Chair was Lau Mordhorst from Polk County. He's going to be a great addition to that. Vice chair will be a great addition also, who is present with us today, is Councilor Chenoweth. MWACT is our local advisory committee for transportation. We also discussed and got updates on Polk County's dangerous intersection, which was 51 and 22 interchange. And then next month, we should get updates on, I requested to our ODOT region director to get an update on Lafayette Highway and 18 intersection. Chat with the chair was also last Thursday. I thought it went really well. Commissioner King joined us along with Captain Brown, and the sheriff rolled in, and it made for great conversation. I'd say the longest subject that we landed on was wildlife, and mostly out towards the west side of McMinnville and the damage that there's a large herd of elk that keep coming down in the valley, tearing up brand new farm fields. So they're trying to discuss what the solutions are there. Also, huge shout out to our planning department. There's a contractor there where there's kind of a lull in the conversation. So I went around the room and I prompted him about, hey, what do you got going on? And he's like, I just want to say, he's got 9 sewer projects coming up. He deals with Yamhill County Planning all the time. He's waiting for the okay for dry weather to start installing these septic systems. And then he just follows up with it unprompted. He's like, they're the best department to work with. I'm like, yes, they are. So I made sure to send Ken Friday an email, and he blasted it out to all the employees there. And so that's phenomenal to hear that. Normally you don't get the positive stuff, at least as commissioners too. You get the, hey, this is wrong, can you help me fix it? But to get the positive stuff is phenomenal, and it's not the first time I've heard it either.
Especially from codes.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
I hear that all the time too. They do an amazing job.
Yeah. Planning, also Thursday night, Planning Commission met for the first time in quite a while. We have one of our Planning Commission members here, also our treasurer. They elected, I think the same. Did they stay the same with chair and vice chair? And that was the only thing that went on that night, because what was on the docket got removed and delayed. So moving on. Let's see, Friday all day was AOC, governance, natural resources, public safety and veterans. Great conversations had all day. Monday was AOC for transportation, health and human services. And then we had our board of directors meeting and the legislative committee to decide on what bills we were gonna support and push through for legislature. Tuesday, had Willamina City Council. They discussed redesignating their enterprise zone and possibly expanding it. The expansion is going to get super difficult because of the time constraints that they're up against, but it sounds like by June 30, this has to be done. So for sure, they'll at least, they approved the redesignation, which will help. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joya, but I think the enterprise zone is a 3-year tax exempt for any new equipment that for a trade sector business if they decide to put in a piece of equipment, it'd be a 3-year exemption for property taxes on it. Yep, okay, cool. I'm just going to repeat what she said. The West Valley, it includes Sheridan and Willamina. Specifically, I was at Willamina, but yes, Sheridan is discussing on expanding or renewing theirs also. Let's see, was able to hit the last portion because Willamina and the second McMinnville's first of the month end up on the same day. So when I leave Willamina's over at 8:30, I hit McMinnville City Council. They happen to still be in session, so I stopped by, caught the last end of it, and they were discussing ARPA funds and projects that were allocated a couple years ago, and they're going to reassess where they're at with those projects to see if there's any changes that need to be made. Wednesday, had another ledge committee with COG, which is our Council of Government, local Council of Governments. We finally finalized our ledge policy and also discussed a letter of support with modifications for House Bill 3104. This affects the funding for our Council of Governments, and what it was, the portion that we didn't really agree with was it actually creates another entity that would almost mimic what COG already is. And so it was a duplication of efforts, and it was going to add just admin costs on top of something that COG already does. And so we're going to support it with the removal of the new program for our area. If the area or a county in Eastern Oregon doesn't have that, then they would have their own program. But for us, we don't need it because it's just a duplication of efforts. Wednesday, what else did I have for Wednesday? I missed my soil and water meeting. It overlapped with COG because it's off schedule, but that should be back on schedule next month. Tonight's RIAC, Road Improvement Advisory Committee, and Lafayette City Council. Welcome, Mayor. And that'll be at 6:30 if anybody wants to harass Hillary. No. This Saturday, there is a McMinnville Innovation Campus Community Forum. I've been involved with this for quite a few months now. Basically, they're outlining what it looks like for the Innovation Center out east of the hospital. It's important that the community come to this, give their input. This will guide that committee and the city of McMinnville and those property owners out there on what the public's vision is on this. It's one thing to have a group of community leaders and property owners, but it's another thing to see what the community's input is on these. So if you need a flyer for that, go to the city of McMinnville. I'm sure it'll be on their website. This is what they mailed out, postcards to all of the residents in McMinnville that looks like this, that has the information on it. But it'll be at the McMinnville Civic Center, 10 a.m. Saturday. Please come. That is all I have. We're going to close this down unless somebody else has.
You forgot to mention that you went to Salem with Mr. Hageberg yesterday.
Yes, I did.
and
I
you
didn't know
rattled
if I wanted.
ODOT's cage.
I didn't know if I wanted. Yes, went with Dave Hageberg, who's Parkway Committee. I'm also on the Parkway Committee. We went down there with a pretty low-key but informational gathering with ODOT. There was 5 of us in this meeting, really trying to hone in on funding through Merkley's office for McDougal's Corner. It's there. It's fun. It's federal funding. It's kind of up in the air whether you get it or not. So you need to really advocate for it. And so this is not our first meeting either. They're supposed to find out some questions that I had. They're going to get some answers within the next couple of days, and then we're going to meet again, hopefully very soon, as this whole process works out with Merkley's office, Andrew Salinas' office, Wyden's office, as we kind of focus and traverse through these different avenues for funding. So anyway,
Thank you.
yes, it
I
was
do
a
want-
very important meeting.
Just one more, I'm sorry, go.
Just a reminder, we have an executive session scheduled for immediately
Oh,
after.
yes,
forum
thank you.
today.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes.
I just want to bring to everybody's attention House Bill 3075. There's an informational hearing today at 3 o'clock. This is Measure 114 on steroids. We know that Measure 114 is that anti-Second Amendment bill, which has been tied up in the courts. This is pretty much limit the ability to purchase and to own modern-day firearms. And because it's been held up in the courts, the legislature came back with a vengeance, and this is a very concerning bill for law-abiding gun owners. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll be bringing more information to you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll close it out for today at 11:29. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for coming and attending. We appreciate it.